From the sports betting capital of the world, Las Vegas, it's time for the show you can't afford to miss. The #1 weekly football preview, Wanna Bet. Get ready for valuable information, analysis, winning picks, and betting strategies. Your hosts, SEC gridiron guru Kip Keefer, and award-winning betting expert, writer, and sports editor for the Las Vegas Sun, Case Keefer. Let's go. Here's everything you need to win big. Wanna Bet.
Well, here we are again at the Superbook at Westgate, Las Vegas, and we are ready for another edition of Wanna Bet from the fabulous city of Las Vegas. I'm Kip Keefer, your host, along with Case Keefer, our co-host and expert analyst. Clay Keefer is handling the direction and production as we roll into another episode, getting deeper into the football season, a lot going on. We'll have our picks coming up later on in the show for this week's key games, so stand by for that. Case, we've covered just about the whole spectrum, albeit just kind of touched on things. We could have gone a lot more in depth, but we've only got about 8 minutes introductory segments every week. So I wanted to kind of shift today to not even the conventional bets on the games and the matchups, but there are also bets available that I guess, for lack of a better term, would be sort of prop bets on individual players and their statistical performance each week. Kind of more of a, and I guess that even covers into the territory which is popular now in like fantasy league, in fantasy sports, where you're basically assembling a team based on their stats for bets. So what are your thoughts on individual player statistical analysis, and how much is that based on just performance numbers, and how much comes into play of who the opponent is and what the styles of the various teams are?
Yeah, player props, another thing that keeps getting more and more popular. It kind of depends where you are. I mean, some of the big sports books that are everywhere will have a big menu of props on every game, but usually, at least in Las Vegas, you're going to find more props on primetime games. The standalone games, Sunday night, Thursday night, Monday night, you're going to find a lot of props, and they really are a good place to attack. There's way less money in total being put into individual prop markets than there are the whole game, and therefore the markets are a lot less refined. You can find some really good opportunities. The double-edged sword part of that is you're also not going to be able to get down as much money. Maybe if you go to a bunch of different sports books and bet, if you're looking to do it really seriously, the limits are going to be kind of small, and that's because the sports books know that they aren't perfect at this yet. There's a lot of years of doing this with full game, and there's a whole lot of money that comes into the market that can really get that number to just about where it should be by the end of the week. It's a lot harder when it comes to individual player props, and I think that presents an opportunity for gamblers. If you're new at this, maybe that's a place you really want to put your head down. Anytime you're looking where there's less money, where there's less competition, I think that's where you're going to find some good values, and you can dive into those matchups and find some great opportunities on player props if you're willing to do the work.
Well, I'm going to throw out a name that you'll probably bring a smile to your face, but as far as individual player performances, I know Cooper Kupp is the guy that you're pretty thankful for after last year's Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, that was a kind of ties the two together from player props and future markets, because one of the first things I bet into, the Super Bowl is the king of prop betting. That's where this is all started, because in the Super Bowl there will be thousands of options to bet on everything. But one of the first things that was posted last year here in Las Vegas was odds to win the Super Bowl MVP. I can't remember off the top of my head what I had, but Cooper Kupp immediately stood out to me. He was a guy that had a record-breaking season, yet didn't really get a lot of MVP love, and it kind of came to the end of the year where, man, maybe we should be giving this guy MVP. He kind of became the talisman of the whole Rams team. They were talking about how he was the elite performer. I really liked the Rams in the Super Bowl. I liked them too much. They ended up not covering and losing the quite a bit of money against the Bengals just on the spread. But luckily, I did take Cooper Kupp. I believe at something like 7-1 maybe, or somewhere in that area, to be the Super Bowl MVP when it first opened. I just thought that was a ridiculous number. I thought that he was the most likely winner for that. And then you saw that final drive, their game-winning drive they had at the end of the game, where it looked like Matthew Stafford was looking only at him, kind of firmed it up. It was still tight to get it into the end, as Aaron Donald had a case, Stafford had a case, but Cooper Kupp winning MVP, that was definitely made it a very good Super Bowl for me. One of my best Super Bowls, despite the Rams regretfully not covering the spread and letting the Bengals cover as an underdog.
Really interesting. Are there things in the numbers, and this again, I know a lot of people that, and this is maybe an unconventional way to bet, but through some of the various FanDuels and those type of operations try to draft a team every week to compete, and it's, I guess, based on a mythical financial investment. You get a certain bankroll, but are there things that people that are really involved in that can look for from the numbers standpoint that we've been discussing about, who might be a good value player for those particular weeks?
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is a whole cottage industry and definitely outside of my area of expertise. Actually, daily fantasy sports is not legal currently in Nevada. It's just a result of how much sway the casinos have, and they didn't want them as operators. It's only a matter of time. The DraftKings, the FanDuels, which also operate the biggest sports books now too, they will be licensed again someday in Nevada. But because of that, I'm not super in the weeds with DFS. I played a lot when it first came out, but not so much now. But I think it's a lot of the same people, actually. The people that are super successful in DFS and can lead you in the right direction in that, they are kind of the sharp, so to speak, in the prop markets. They're the ones who really go after the individual sports. So if you're watching this and you're into DFS, it's more likely you might know even better where to go than me when it comes to prop markets, just with where I am and what's available. I've kind of stuck to the more traditional wagering, but you are definitely on the right track there. Those two things are especially intertwined, the player props and the daily fantasy sports.
Because logic dictates that the more adept you are at identifying guys that might really perform well, that are a very low investment, is the key to being really successful in that.
Yeah, the way that can kind of fall off as far as player props is, some of the low-level guys that you're going to want to be buying low on a DFS because they have a low price tag, you're not going to find a whole lot of props on them, at least in a traditional game. Maybe once you get to deep in the playoffs, especially the Super Bowl, you can find a number on anyone. But as far as player props and being able to get a decent bet down and do it in Las Vegas, you're going to need to focus more on the key guys because the sports books here just aren't posting a gigantic menu with bets on every single guy, and I think that's a lot of the sports books nationally as well. If you are wanting to do that work and buy super low on guys who you've barely even heard of, I think DFS is more your route. But prop betting is constantly expanding, and who knows, maybe we're just a few years down the line from where there will be a lot more props available on every game.
So in your research, if you've noticed in a game a week or two before, or the numbers reflect it, somebody that's, let's say, a running back that's really on an upward trajectory and is performing well, is on a primetime game, and they put a line out on over/under how many yards he might gain, is that an area you would stray into if you just happened on to you make those kind of bets?
Oh yeah, for sure. I try to bet the props on every primetime game. It's always something I'm looking at, and this is one area where kind of the old school handicapping method is king. You can try to dig into what happened at practice that week. Look at what the coach is saying. Try to get an idea. Usage is so important when you're looking at props. So, if it is a guy that's maybe not one of the big names, you don't know how much he's going to be on the field. If you get, some solid intel or feel like you've uncovered something and he's going to be on the field more or less, that's really going to indicate whether you go over and under. And the biggest thing I would say with props, the way you can improve yourself the most, it might seem simple, but shop around. There's a lot of different numbers at different sports books. So if you like the over on someone, you could sometimes find 5 different yards one place than you can the other. That also creates some middling opportunities, which we talked about on earlier episodes. But props, it's constantly expanding, and certainly something I look to do in those primetime games.
Well, we've got the picks coming up for this week. Case Keefer's slate is up next. Stay right where you are on Wanna Bet.
Hey, it's Case Keefer back here with my best bet segment on Wanna Bet, and back joyously after a perfect 4-0 week last week. Finally broke through with the undefeated slate. Feels like we had been knocking at the door throughout the year, but finally were able to get it done last week in Conference Championship Week / NFL Week 13. Of course, there was only one college football bet. We ended up making Kansas State plus 2.5 against TCU in the Big 12 Championship. That literally ended up winning by an inch, but we'll take it. I'm already looking at some bowl stuff. I won't give any official picks this week. I guess we'll break that down more on the future weeks of the show. It's just such a cat and mouse game now. It's changed so much in the 10 years or more than 10 years I've been doing this, especially this time of year. It's all about information, trying to beat the moves on guys before guys go in the portal or, declare for the draft, announce they're missing the bowl game, coaching changes. It's very interesting this time of year. I will say 2 of the early positions I have taken are kind of in reverse of that Big 12 championship play we made last week. I did end up laying 3 with Alabama in the Sugar Bowl this week against Kansas State. I get that a lot of Crimson Tide guys are going to be opting out. Kansas State's going to have a much more full team, but there's just such a talent discrepancy here. Even if it is a bunch of Alabama guys we haven't seen much of this year, and I know Kansas State will be more motivated, but I thought this line is probably more fair with all that being taken into account. Maybe like 6 or something, and I think we saw it open as high as 5.5. But when it got down to 3, that was just a buy point for me. So maybe foolish, but I went with Alabama -3. And then actually, I think the TCU Michigan game, that might be a surprise to anyone who's followed anything I've done all year because I've bet against TCU so much. I just really think that a fair number there is 7. I might have jumped the gun a little bit. I bought some TCU plus 8.5 when I saw probably the most prominent sports book, at least in Las Vegas, Circa, that takes the biggest bets. They got down to 7. I kind of freaked out. I was like, oh, this might be my last chance to get below 7. Bought some 8.5. It's since gone back up to 7.5 at Circa, now mostly 7.5 and 8. So maybe I could have bided my time and gotten a higher number, but went ahead and went with TCU plus 8.5. Look, if Michigan brings their best, this should be their game, but they've been pretty inconsistent throughout the year. I don't always love their game plans. I think their offense can be kind of vanilla. I think Sonny Dykes will have some things up his sleeve. I think more than a touchdown, I'm okay with that. I would expect Michigan to win outright. Just some early thoughts on the college football playoff. I really think Georgia is the big loser in all this, and it's weird to say loser because I still think they win the national championship. I still think they're the best team, but I think people have a tough time wrapping their head around this. But if Ohio State and Michigan were playing again in the first round of the playoff, Ohio State was going to be a favorite. Now they're not going to be an 8-point favorite like they were against Michigan the first time around. And of course losing by 3 touchdowns with the Wolverines pulling away at the end, but they're still going to be like a 3, 2.5 at the absolute smallest point favorite. Look, all year, Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama, those have been the 3 topped power-rated teams by bookmakers and the market alike. It's moved around a lot, but now we get to the playoff, and the 2 best teams in the playoff are having to play in the first round. I don't want to slam the committee or anything. I think they actually probably did the seeding right based on resumes, but there's just a difference between resumes and actual power rating, actual value of a team. I think this is a kind of a good spot for Ohio State. They're going to be hungry coming off of that bad loss. I still think the ceiling of this offense is higher than any other offense. So I think it's kind of unfair to Georgia that they have to play them in the first game. I expect Georgia to win. I'm even kind of I don't know if I'll bet that game. I'm kind of considering maybe laying it with Georgia at less than a touchdown, but I think Ohio State's really dangerous, and I would like Georgia's chances a lot better against Michigan or TCU. I'm also kind of unhappy with that matchup because I have futures on both those teams. Ohio State, I bought 6-1 right when it opened last January, and then if you were following along my stuff at LasVegasSun.com or Las Vegas Weekly, I bet some Georgia plus 450 right before the start of the season. Kind of going back to that whole idea of Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama being the 3 best teams. I figured I would take 2 of the 3 at the highest prices I could get and press my luck. I wish they could play on the championship game, but I guess on the plus side, one of the 2 will be there, and I can maneuver from there. I said that Ohio State was the first bet I made all football season. That's actually a lie. It might have been my second because the first bet I made this college football season, really excited, hoping it comes in today, actually. Caleb Williams to win the Heisman. I think I mentioned it on one of our intro segments of Wanna Bet early in the year. I bet him at 15-1, so really hoping he collects the hardware in New York this week. And if he doesn't, this might be the last time you hear me on this segment because I'm going to be very much on tilt. I'm going to have some time to get over that. Actually, I wouldn't be on tilt depending on who else wanted. If Max Duggan wanted, that would be absolute disaster. But I do actually have smaller positions on Stetson Bennett at 60-1. I bet him during the Oregon game when I just thought, maybe this Georgia offense is going to be just ridiculous all year, and he'll win kind of a Lifetime Achievement Award with his story. I don't necessarily think that was a terrible bet at 60-1. I don't think he's going to win. And then when Hendon Hooker briefly became the favorite overall, I thought that was a kind of an overreaction, especially before a game with Georgia. So I bought back some CJ Stroud. That's actually my biggest bet, but my biggest winner is still set up to be Caleb Williams, so we're hoping that comes in. I just like to give you guys a little insight on kind of what I was thinking there and why I think futures can be such a good money-making opportunity if you're willing to build these portfolios throughout the year. So hopefully a good one comes through for me on Saturday at that. Again, we'll get more on college football coming up. So let's touch on the NFL real quickly, where we went 3-0 last week to go 24-16-1 for the year. 60% will absolutely take that. Let's go with 3 more plays. This week, I'm going to start with Tampa Bay plus 3.5 at San Francisco. I know the 49ers defense looks really scary right now. Maybe this, I certainly wouldn't be betting this without the Jimmy Garoppolo injury, but I don't know. Tampa Bay's defense is quite good as well. They should be getting some guys back for this game. And just because we're hearing the great tales of Brock Purdy this week, and he looked okay in the first week, I don't think I'm ready for him to be backing him in an NFL game. So give me Tampa Bay plus 3.5. Another 3.5 point dog on the West Coast, but this one a home team. Give me the Chargers plus 3.5. I think we're probably going to get better injury news as the week goes on with the Chargers. Look, they were terrible last week here in Las Vegas, but they had 3 offensive line starters out, a bunch of guys still out. I'm just not as high on the Dolphins. I'm looking for spots to fade them. I think the Chargers make one last push here, so give me them plus 3.5. And then I'll finish it off with Cleveland plus 6 at Cincinnati. This is an ultimate sell high on the Bengals. I'm surprised I didn't pick the Bengals actually last week on the show. It was one of my biggest bets if you were following along on LasVegasSun.com against the Chiefs. They won that game outright in Cincinnati, but now hosting Cleveland, who looked bad last week in Deshaun Watson's return, but of course there was some rust there. Cleveland just always plays Cincinnati tough. We were on them in their first meeting of the year here on Wanna Bet. I think they play them again tough here. I wouldn't even mind sprinkling some on the money line, but I'm going to take Cleveland plus 6 to go with Tampa Bay plus 3.5 and the Chargers plus 3.5. Since we've talked so much about futures, I'll just throw in 2 really quickly here at the end. Josh Jacobs leading the NFL in rushing, but if you look at the Raiders' rush defense is coming up. I think they're pretty tough. I think he's going to see a decline. Right now, to lead the NFL in rushing, you can get both Nick Chubb at 5-1, Derrick Henry at 6-1. I think it's either going to be Jacobs, Chubb, or Henry here at the end of these last 5 games. Give me a shot with Chubb and Henry. I bet both of those today, actually. I wanted to bet just Chubb at first, but then seeing Henry at 6-1, I think he has the easier slate coming up. I think one of those 2 guys catches Jacobs. So if you have those numbers, fire away. Always looking to get values on the futures. Always looking to get value across the board. Stick around for Kip's segment on Wanna Bet next.
Listen to what callers are saying about the morning after.
But I just wanted to say thank you. You guys bring a lot of information. To me, your show is a lot different than most. I can't really pinpoint it. It's just maybe it's the friendliness. Maybe it's just the way that you guys come across. More like family to me. And I just love listening every Sunday when I get the opportunity.
The morning after, Sundays 9 to 11 a.m. on WJOX 94.5 Birmingham. Hey everybody, it's Kip Keefer now on Wanna Bet, our SEC segment this week. And of course, it's going to be tough to give you games for this week for SEC football teams because none of them are playing, but a lot of them are playing in bowl games and playoff games coming up in the next couple of weeks. So I thought we'd give a basic preview of what to expect and what to be looking for as you start to form your holiday betting strategies on all of these matchups. The SEC, out of their 14 teams, have 11 of them in the postseason. That's a pretty remarkable accomplishment if you think about it. And the Georgia Bulldogs, of course, top of that list as they are the number 1 seed in the college football playoff. They will face off against Ohio State on New Year's Eve in Atlanta, their 3rd game this year in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Been joking this week that they've played more times than the Falcons in Mercedes-Benz on the season. They opened the season with a 49-3 win over Oregon and then topped that by a point, knocking off LSU last week in the SEC championship game as they put up 50 and beat the Tigers 50-30. Now it's Ohio State who has gotten into the playoff by benefiting from the loss by USC in the Pac-12 title game as Utah ended the Trojans' dreams and propelled the Buckeyes back into the limelight in the tournament. And Las Vegas has taken a pretty positive view of the chances that there's going to be a lot of support for Ohio State, setting this line at only 6.5. Georgia has been a massive double-digit favorite all season long in every game they've played, basically. But now it is a scant 6.5. If you're still high on the Bulldogs and their proficiency, both offensive and defensively, this is probably a pretty good spot to start thinking about at 6.5. The nice thing about the playoff game, as opposed to the traditional bowl games, is we know who's going to line up and play in these games. We don't know that in all the bowl games, and that's something you really need to track and keep an eye on And next week here on Wanna Bet, we'll have a lot more information when we get into some actual picks of who's going to sit out or opt out of a lot of those games, because of course who shows up and plays in these games is critically important. It was a huge factor last year in a very successful betting opportunity in the postseason, because teams that rosters were basically decimated by defections, guys going into the transfer portal or just sitting out in favor of avoiding any chance of injury before the NFL draft, really alters the look of what you have on the field. So that's something to really keep close eye on as we move closer to kicking off these games. One of the first ones, and the lines, of course, are already out, is a very unusual trip to Las Vegas for the Florida Gators. The Las Vegas Bowl, I don't think has ever hosted an SEC team, and Florida will play Oregon State, who's kind of a fast-rising rated team. I think they got in the top 15 at the end of the year. Their last game was against Oregon, and that was very significant because the Ducks, if they could have beaten Oregon State, would have gotten to the Pac-12 title game, which Utah got the opportunity, and we saw what Utah ultimately did to USC. So now Florida plays Oregon State, and a lot of folks really high on the Beavers from Corvallis, Oregon. They are a 10.5-point favorite over an SEC team, and I think Florida's going to be excited to go to Las Vegas and play in this game. This is a little better than getting a bid to, and no disrespect to Nashville, the Music City Bowl, or some of the other games that you could get invited to that don't quite have the geographic impact and the excitement of going to a exotic location like Las Vegas. So I think the Gators as a team will be pumped up. The question is Anthony Richardson going to play, their great quarterback, or some of their other experienced players, or, as I mentioned, are they going to opt out? That's a big factor. And these lines are, again, not predictions on how the game's going to go by Vegas. These games, the lines are set by public perception of the teams. So this means that Vegas believes that Oregon State is going to be an attractive betting option, and they had to assign enough points to give Florida that same kind of attractiveness on the other side. Oregon State just mowed over Oregon after being down in that game big. They dominated the second half and didn't even throw the ball. They just lined up and ran it right down their throat. They're not going to be able to do that against the Gators. An SEC defense is not going to be run all over like Oregon State was able to do to Oregon. And Oregon State's done all of their really good work at home in a real tough place to play in their kind of small, loud stadium. I think Florida preliminarily is one of the games you need to keep an eye on. If that line stays at 10 or 10.5, and any of the major players for Florida are in the game, I like Florida going into this as a good betting option in bowl season. Some other kind of intriguing games, and again, so many of these are predicated on who plays, but you've got Alabama, who has had a history of maybe letting down a little bit when they're not in the mainstream of the playoff. They go to the Sugar Bowl the day of the playoff games and play the opener. It's an 11 o'clock kickoff Central Time, and they will meet Kansas State, who, of course, knocked TCU off as the Big 12 champion last Saturday. Alabama has a better roster, of course, than K-State, but this is one of those games that's going to mean a lot more to the Wildcats than to the Crimson Tide. Being in a major bowl and playing Alabama, you're going to get their best shot. They're a 3.5-point underdog. Alabama's certainly better. Bryce Young and Will Anderson's status are big questions for that game, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Tennessee, another top SEC team, they go to the Orange Bowl And boy, this is an Orange Bowl. It's Clemson and Tennessee in the Orange Bowl. That's a lot of orange. Tennessee, without Hendon Hooker, they have done a good job under Joe Milton in the Vanderbilt game to run the Commodores out of the arena. So maybe this is going to be a good spot for Tennessee again, who are coming into this game as a significant underdog to Clemson, 7 points. And if that line stays the same, preliminarily, I like Tennessee. So there's some good bowl matchups, and we're going to be giving you a complete report next week on specific games to bet, and we hope that you'll tune in then. Have a great week this week, everybody. I hope your holiday season is starting off on a joyous note, and we will talk to you right here next week on Wanna Bet.